Welcome to math video number 1. Today we are adding and subtracting decimals, and there is a corresponding worksheet in your packet for the assignment built off of this lesson. If you're a super genius at adding and subtracting decimals, this video may not help you at all, but for anybody who struggles, this will give you everything you need to know. You can watch and rewatch it as many times as you need to. So the key thing you have to remember about adding and subtracting decimals is that you have to line up the decimals. So we have all these problems here and fill the board. I'm going to go through and build stacks where these numbers are on top of each other so that the decimal points themselves are lined up. Cameraman doesn't have to follow me here, but I'm going to grab an eraser and come right back. So what we're looking to do is line up all the decimals. So for these, if we line up the decimals, for adding, you can stack them any way you want to stack them. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to move these numbers into a stack. So I'm going to just put the 0.13 under the 0.4 in such a way that the decimal lines up with the decimal, forcing the 1 to line up with the 4, and then the 3 is just stuck under here underneath an empty space, and that's a better way to write that problem because now the decimal points are lined up. A moment ago, you might have been tempted to do 13 plus 4 and have 17, and that would have been completely wrong. What we need to do is add these up. For adding, you don't have to fill zeros in these empties. If you want to do it, fine. If you don't, fine. So I'll gently put a 0 there, but we don't need that. If we add up these, it's a 3. Add up those, it's a 5. And that's the scheme of what we're doing for adding. For this, I'll go again, another problem. If I take the 0.45 and try to line it up with this, the point goes with the point, the 4 has to go under the 3, the 5 is just an empty space, clear that out of there, and then I look to add 5, 7, decimal stays in the line, 2, if you wanted a 0 there, fine, you don't need it. If we go to do this, and I line these up, I can either stick the 8 under the 7 or the 7 under the 8, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to go to 8 under 7, just to pick a choice. This one, if we add it up, creates a little bit of an issue. The decimal needs to stay in a line. 7 plus 8 is 15. 15 can't fit in this single space. So when you get something that doesn't fit in a space, we have to carry, as always. 7 plus 8 is 15. Only the 5 can stay in that position. And there has to be a 1 carry back to here, where there's some invisible zeros. If those help you, fill them. If you don't need to do it, don't do it. But the 1 and the 15 carries back to the left to where we started. This, same kind of thing. If I get the decimals in a stack, it forces the 3 under the 4, the 5 under the 2, 7 is empty space. So 7, 7, 7, everything's 7s, lucky 7s today, and the decimal stays in the line. That's adding, we're halfway done. If I lost you, hit a quick rerun and come back to where you are and we'll subtract. Subtracting, same thing applies, but a small detail changes. The zeros become not do it if you feel like, don't do it if you don't. The zeros become, if there's a space on the top, you have to do a 0 to let you borrow. If you're ever short a 0 on the bottom number, like this, nobody cares still for subtract. Okay. But empties on the top have to have zeros to make borrowing possible. The other thing that's different about subtract is when you stack them, the first number has to stay on top. The second number has to go underneath. When you add it, you can stack however you want, so we get a little more flexibility there. But for subtracting, if I get the decimals lined up, that's going to force the 2 under the 3, the 4 under the 7. We're going to subtract that new stack of numbers. Empties on the bottom, as I just said, don't matter. If you want to do a 0, do a 0. You don't want to do a 0, no one cares. But if that's empty on the top, you would have to do it. Okay, subtract for 6, subtract for 3, subtract for 1, and keep the decimal nice and in line. This one, building our stacks, the 2 that's first has to go on top. And if I try to line up the 17 with the 2, decimals lining up makes 1 under the 2. And then the 7 goes over there. For the first time today, you have to do the 0 if you're subtracting. And if you got an empty on top, you've got to do a 0 there to promote borrowing. 0 can't subtract 7, but if we borrow from the 2 to make a 1, the 10 we make can subtract 7 to get a 3. That's a 0, and the decimal has to stay in the line. We have to put that 0 because it keeps the decimal in the right spot relative to all the place values. This, we're back to an add idea, slight scramble of order, because I'm doing one more new idea, which is when you don't see a decimal, there's one invisibly there. So this has an invisible decimal that I'll make visible by putting it on the right. Likewise, this 4 has an invisible decimal on the right. This 3 has an invisible decimal on the right. So if you don't see a decimal, put one on the right. And then repeat the process we were doing. Stack adding any order you want. If decimals line up, 5s with 3, add up. Zeros don't matter in these empties. Whatever you want to do with that, adding gets us 1 and 8. For this, subtracting, order matters. First number has to go first. And if we're lining up the decimals, that forces the 1 to go under the 4, the 2 and the 3 to follow suit. And here's a problem where the zeros have to be present. If they're subtracting, and if there's empties on the top, we need zeros. And to borrow, you have to go all the way to the beginning. 4 borrows down to 3 to create a temporary 10. But reborrow 10 down to 9 to create another 10 that's permanent. 10 minus 3 is 7. Subtracting is another 7. Lucky 7s again. Decimal stays in the line, and then a 2 over there. Last one of the day. Again, this has to stay first to keep the decimal lined up. It forces the 3 to go under the 4. And this is one where the empties versus zeros, you do whatever you want. You like a 0 there, fill it. It doesn't matter because we're subtracting. It doesn't matter on the bottom. Top matter. 7 is subtracting, decimal in the line, 1 over there, and that's adding and subtracting decimals. You have a sheet in your packet titled Adding and Subtracting Decimals, so you can go to work on that. Hope you're healthy and well. If you have questions, email me and I'll try to get them in the next video.